Welcome to the business of music. I'm Flossy the Boss, and today I'm going to be talking about leasing beats. If you're an artist today, you can go online and find thousands and thousands of beats for really cheap, and that might seem really cool if you're hurting for money. And if you're a producer, you probably have hundreds and hundreds of beats just sitting in your computer. So a great and easy way for a producer to make some extra money is to let artists lease or use those beats that are just lying around collecting dust. The artist won't actually own the beat, but instead artists would get a license or the right to use that beat for a limited period of time. And then the rights would revert back to the producer, which means the producer can literally lease that same exact beat to several other artists over and over again. So the producer can make an unlimited amount of money from that same exact beat. Now this might seem great for the producer. However, if you're the artist, this is not so great. Even though the artist is getting a beat for a really great price, there are lots of problems with leasing a beat. Most artists are not really paying attention to the contract that comes along when you lease a beat. The artist is usually interested in getting that beat. They're hyped up about getting in the studio, making that beat, and dropping a hit song, which is great. So let me explain. A beat lease agreement allows the artist to use the producer's beat or instrumental and add their vocals to that instrumental to create a whole new song, or as we call it, a master. The producer maintains complete full ownership of that copyright in that beat or instrumental, while giving the artist either an exclusive or a non-exclusive license to use that beat. Now these are the two types of beat lease agreements. The non-exclusive beat lease agreement. This is usually for a specific period of time, such as maybe 1 year or 2 years. Or it's based off a set number of streams. And once you reach that number of streams, your agreement would then either terminate and you'd have to renew it, or you can opt to not renew and no longer use that particular beat. The producer can then continue to sell that same beat over and over again until someone leases that beat on an exclusive basis, which brings us to the exclusive beats lease agreement. The artist pays a higher fee for the exclusive rights to use that beat or instrumental, and the producer can no longer lease that beat to anyone else, thus exclusive. Here are a few setbacks or problems with leasing beats. First, in most beat lease contracts, the producer almost always maintains ownership of that beat. Next, how do you really know if that producer that you're buying that beat from created that beat, or if they actually own that beat? There are lots of people out there, producers, selling beats that are not their own. They may have gotten it online, stole it, and they're selling other producers' beats without their permission. Another great issue is you might pay for the exclusive lease, and the producer could be selling that same beat exclusively to other artists. So multiple artists thinking they have exclusivity. And if a producer sells that same beat that you purchase exclusively to another artist, even on a non-exclusive basis, it then makes your exclusive beat that you paid for a non-exclusive beat. And as I mentioned, most of the time when you pay for an exclusive lease, the producer will still own that beat. This is why contracts are so important. Here's what I suggest in order to protect yourself. Only purchase a beat on an exclusive basis and give the producer a contract that you had created by a professional. If you're a serious artist, this is the only option. If you're spending any money at all on creating music, the goal is to make a hit so that you blow up and can make tons and tons of money. So spend a couple extra dollars and buy that beat exclusively. If the song blows up and other people are using that same beat, you are going to run into lawsuits for sure. Let me give you an example. Lil Nas X paid $30 for the beat he used on Old Town Road. Pretty good price for that beat. That beat that Lil Nas X purchased had an uncleared banjo sample from the 9 Inch Nails group and their song 34 Ghosts 4. Now, 9 Inch Nails sued Lil Nas X for using that sample. 9 Inch Nails had every right to keep 100% of all the monies earned from that song for copyright infringement. They eventually reached a settlement. Now, Sony also sued Lil Nas X for $25 million for an uncleared sample from the Bobby Caldwell song Carry On. So you can see why there's problems. And yes, that producer still maintains ownership interest in that Lil Nas X hit and continues to make lots of money from that song. Another example, an artist signs a multi-million-dollar deal with Interscope Geffen. I was retained or hired to get all of these producers that had beats and songs that are out with this artist and clear their catalog. Get all these producers signed off with a proper producer agreement. The beats were purchased on a non-exclusive basis. I had to track down the producers, and my job was to now present these producers with a formal industry producer agreement. Those $25 non-exclusive beats ended up costing as much as $50,000 for just one beat for the exclusive ownership that's needed in a standard industry producer agreement. As you can imagine, yes, we could have saved a lot of money in the beginning if we just did the right agreement. We all want to have a giant hit like Lil Nas X, but we all want to keep that money made from that hit. So this is why I suggest that you purchase the beat exclusively and you have a professional contract created so that you are the one that is protected. Before you give the producer your contract for the beat, there's a couple things that you need to work out. Do the following. First, Shazam the beat to see if the beat has been used, and if it has, how many times has this beat been used? You can decide, does this make sense for you? See if that producer's name is also credited to the beat, so you can confirm it that this is in fact the same producer. Google the producer's names to see if anyone has had any issues or any problems with that producer. Now, if everything checks out, you can give the producer your agreement. Most of the time, the producer will give you a standard or generic agreement that does not cover you for everything that you need when your song climbs to #1. And when you're making millions of dollars coming in, you don't need any kind of problems. The most important things to include in an agreement are the following. Let me break it down. First, you have the scope. The scope tells you exactly what the artist is allowed to do with the beat. This should state that the artist can take the instrumental provided by the producer and add vocals to it to create a whole new song or a master. Most often you can't edit or modify the instrumental, and you're not allowed to sell the beat alone as an instrumental. It has to have vocals included in order to sell it. Next is the territory. The contract needs to detail where the artist is allowed to sell the new song. And obviously you want to sell it everywhere, so I suggest in the territory, it should read the universe. Now the term. This states how long the lease will last. In the industry standard producer agreement, it would state that the producer is paid for their services, then the producer will transfer the copyright ownership interest to the artist, which is super important for many, many reasons. And the term would be in perpetuity, forever. However, in the beats lease agreement, it usually outlines either how many years or how many streams before the lease ends. And once that lease ends, the artist would then have to decide to either create a new agreement, renew the agreement with the producer, or pull down the song and stop selling that current song. And as you can imagine, if your song starts taking off, you're in a little bit of a bind. The producer owns the beats and kind of controls what you're doing. So imagine if you did a non-exclusive lease agreement for a beat. Meanwhile, the producer sells another artist the exclusive lease to that exact same beat. And at the end of your term, right when your song starts blowing up, you find out that someone else owns that song. You're going to then be in a bad situation. Another key point is the publishing, probably the most important in my opinion. If the producer provides the artist with the music, you can assume the producer will retain 50% of the publishing. And if the artist is providing the vocals, the artist would retain the other 50% of the publishing. This is something that needs to be spelled out in the agreement. The exact percentages should be in there. Also, the credit. The contract needs to detail exactly how to credit the producer. I have seen many agreements that require an artist to credit a producer in a very specific manner. And if the artist does not properly credit that producer, whether it's an accident or on purpose, the producer can then use that against the artist and cause a breach of the agreement, and then the producer can then terminate or even sue the artist. So you don't want that to happen. And finally, the delivery. Make sure to identify exactly what you're expecting from the producer when they send you that music. Is it a fully mixed and equalized WAV or AIF file? Or is it separated stems with each individual instrument tracked out? Which, by the way, is what I prefer if possible. Now, these are just some of the key things that you need to have included in the formal producer agreement when getting a beat from a producer. I strongly suggest that you present the producer with an industry standard agreement that has all of these things we talked about spelled out to protect you when your song blows up and you start making millions of dollars. And if you need a contract, hit me up, DM me on Instagram at Flossy The Boss, and I can draft one up for you. I hope this helps you on your journey to become a successful and major artist. Now listen, I've been in the business for over 25 plus years, and I've seen every worst case scenario. So it's always best to protect yourself with a nicely written agreement so you don't have these issues. And if there's a topic that you need help with or want some advice on, feel free to DM me and I'll talk about it on my next episode. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.